I'm very happy to hand it over to Honourable Prime Minister, who's been leading the charge on climate change. And please say some words first. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deborah. I'll certainly be very brief. And this notion that you learn from us, I'm not too sure about that. You know, Deborah is the foremost environmentalist perhaps in this hemisphere. And I can attest to the fact that the nature-based solutions work. I recall several years ago, I believe back in 2018, Deborah invited me to Dune Deck in the United States. That's a community in the Hamptons that was actually destroyed by a hurricane several years ago. And I observed that they had built a number of dunes, sand dunes, as a protective mechanism. Now at that time, we were contemplating doing business with PLH, that is the Barbados Ocean Club, and we wanted to make sure that we developed the island in a sustainable way. You would have known that our sister island Barbados was decimated in 2017 by Hurricane Irma. In fact, the decimation was so bad that 90% of the properties there were damaged, and the island was literally deemed uninhabitable. We had to evacuate all of the residents of Barbuda. I think it's perhaps the first time in history that an entire island had to be evacuated of all its residents. So based on the risk, we recognized that we had to rebuild in a very sustainable way. And the developments that we were pursuing at the time too, we wanted to make sure that they were done in a sustainable way. So, for example, the PLH project, there's a particular area at Palmetto Point, which is on the coast. And they were able to establish some dunes, some sand dunes, as high as 14 feet. And what we've observed since then, I mean, we have had some storms, not as ferocious as Hurricane Irma, but we observed that there has been absolutely no damage. And in addition to that, the environment has been preserved. The flooding that we would have observed from previous storm surges, there have been no flooding. And we observed too that the native species are thriving. A number of birds and ducks and so on are now taking habitat within that space. So we have no doubt that the nature-based interventions, they work. And we also partnering with Deborah and John Paul DeJoria with this Center of Excellence, in which they also literally preserving and enhancing our coral reefs. So a couple of years ago, they actually planted some artificial reefs, and they have been growing corals in those reefs, and we have observed too that the marine life would have increased significantly. In fact, we have a thriving marine space there. So this is not just a theoretical concept. It is actually happening in reality, in which we would have seen, let's say, a resurgence in the marine life, and at the same time, those reefs are providing some level of, let's say, protection for the shoreline. And I'm pretty sure too that as we expand that reef and we are subjected to storms in the future, that those artificial reefs will help to protect the shoreline. I believe too that it is a type of technology that could be replicated in other island states. And you know that as a result of this SIDS, we're hoping to have better cooperation and collaboration among SIDS. In fact, I'm suggesting that we call ourselves the G39, you know, the group of 39, as we pursue initiatives jointly to certainly get the scale and to benefit concurrently from the various technologies. Now, one of the initiatives that we are pursuing, which I'm sure will complement all of the various nature-based initiatives, is the establishment of a development bank for SIDS. Now, this concept of a development bank, I think, is a novel idea, in that the assets of the bank will comprise primarily of our, let's say, terrestrial and marine conservation assets. I mean, within SIDS, we have a significant amount of marine assets under our control. As Deborah says, we control up to 1/3 of the global seascape. And we know that the oceans, they represent a significant amount of or I say they carbon sink for a significant amount of carbon. In addition to that, the mangroves and certainly the seagrass, they sequester a significant amount of carbon. We've been advised to by the scientists that our mangroves, for example, that they sequester as much as 4 times the amount of carbon as other terrestrial areas. So for us, the issue of restoration of the marine space to restore our reefs and even restoring mangroves, very important. And in terms of the terrestrial space, the whole issue of reforestation is also very important. So what we'll be doing in essence is that these assets that we have reserved for conservation, we intend to invest them in this development bank. And the whole idea is to monetize those assets. So for example, we expect to develop a carbon credit scheme so that we will measure and monetize the carbon that is sequestered. And hopefully that will be a good source of revenue for SIDS as we seek to resolve our financial problems, because one of the major issues affecting SIDS is the issue of access to financing to adapt and to mitigate against the effects of climate change. And rather than relying exclusively on our international partners for assistance, we have to help ourselves, and that is why this idea of this bank, is a novel idea, a very innovative idea. So you can see that we are pursuing innovations. We are also partnering with the private sector. We're very pleased to have one of the foremost environmental scientists in this hemisphere and beyond, Dr. Browne and John Paul DeJoria, who is a well-known philanthropist, to be partnering with us and providing resources. Now, you know too that emanating from this SIDS conference, there will be a center of excellence. And we're establishing a number of institutions to include a data hub. We will also have a Davos-style forum in which we will invite investors to invest in various initiatives, including the proposed bank. Already, we have held discussions with the family offices who are present here at this conference, and many of them have pledged support. And we expect our international partners, I see Ireland and so on represented here, that they will help to capitalize this bank and to help us to bring more resources to island states as we seek to achieve resilient prosperity within the next 10 years. So it is certainly a very exciting period for SIDS. I know that we have had challenges. We have had to contend with increased emissions and the more frequent and ferocious hurricanes and other climate events. But at the same time, we are making incremental progress, and we expect that within the coming years that the progress will be accelerated, because we are determining that SIDS should achieve the SDGs within the next decade. Plus, we're looking to go beyond SIDS. And again, we want to make sure that we pursue our development in a very environmentally sustainable way. And I just want to take the opportunity to assure all of our guests here that the Antigua and Barbuda government is certainly an environmentally responsible government. We do recognize that as we pursue these developments that there will be some impact. You cannot develop without having some level of impact. But in terms of any irreversible damage to the environment, we make sure that that is not the case, and we continue to enhance our environment to make sure that we have a pristine environment in which to live, because we are literally at the forefront of this climate fight, fighting for climate justice, fighting for financial justice, and we're leading by example. We even putting systems in place to reduce our emissions. I can tell you, for example, on our sister island Barbuda, we have installed an energy plant that actually provides electricity for about 15 hours a day. It's a green energy plant, a solar plant with batteries. And within the next couple of years, we intend to purchase additional battery storage so that Barbuda will become the first island community, perhaps in the world, to be powered exclusively by green energy. So again, we are fully committed. Fully committed and certainly leading by example. I am also happy that the developments that are taking place on our sister island Barbuda as one of the most vulnerable countries in the world, such that the environment is far more resilient compared to prior years. In fact, with that energy plant, we have also buried our cables, electrical and telephone cables, and the whole idea subsequently is to bury all of the cables on Barbuda, then on Antigua. In fact, we have started the process here on Antigua as well, on Friesel Road. We have literally laid all of the conduits, and very shortly they'll be moving the overhead lines on the ground. So we have been climate proofing our country, and to make sure that we become more resilient, at the same time to achieve the SDGs within the next 10 years. So I want to thank all of our international partners who have partnered with us to help us to become more climate resilient and to address the existential threat of climate change, which is the most significant threat facing all of humanity. And I certainly want to thank all of you as climate advocates. I believe that because you're here, that you are stewards, good stewards of the environment and advocates. Clearly, we need more climate advocates in order to hold policyholders responsible, because we only have one planet in which to live. There's no planet B. And all of us must take a responsibility to hold countries and certainly leaders responsible, to hold companies as well, especially those that are large emitters. Even though within the small island states space in which we are only accountable for about 1% of emissions, we continue to reduce our emissions to lead by example. However, there are some large polluting countries that must, as a matter of priority, reduce their emissions. Absolutely critical that they do so, because if there is an overshoot of the 1.5% degree threshold, then evidently it would not only be catastrophic for small island states, but even larger countries, because you have coastal communities too. Yes, you may have better capacity to recover, greater resilience, but at the same time, we have to look at the overall impact on the planet and the impact on human civilization. So it requires a collective effort of all, and constructive engagement. The COPs are certainly they represent the opportunity for us to continue to involve in constructive engagements. You know that within recent times, Antigua and Barbuda, along with Tuvalu and other countries, we have formed the Commission on Climate Change and International Law, that is the SIDS Commission on Climate Change and International Law courses, and would have gotten a favorable opinion from ITLAS, confirming that all countries have an obligation to protect the marine environment, and that carbon in itself represents waste, and that these countries, these large polluting countries, they are obviously damaging the marine space, and that they are literally violating their treaty obligations to protect and to preserve the marine environment. That opinion is important from the standpoint of having more honest discussions with these large polluting countries, and to get better cooperation so that they don't believe that it's only a moral issue to protect the environment, but it's also a legal issue. And we will hope that we will not have to pursue further court action, and that ultimately that we'll all understand that we have to be responsible stewards of the environment, and that we have to work collectively to have an all-of-society approach to ensure that we preserve and protect our planet for future generations. So I thank you very much for engaging. I observe that we may have one or two detractors of my government in the room, but just in case they make any claim to say that we're not environmentally responsible, I assure all of our guests that it's a fallacy. Thank you very much.